Chapter 17 of Babbitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. Babbitt by Sinclair Lewis. Chapter 17. 1. There are but 3 or 4 old houses in Floral Heights, and in Floral Heights an old house is one which was built before 1880. The largest of these is the residence of William Washington Eathorne, president of the First State Bank. The Eathorne mansion preserves the memory of the nice parts of Zenith, as they appeared from 1860 to 1900. It is a red brick immensity with gray sandstone lintels, and a roof of slate in courses of red, green, and dyspeptic yellow. There are 2 anemic towers, one roofed with copper, the other crowned with cast-iron ferns. The porch is like an open tomb. It is supported by squat granite pillars, above which hang frozen cascades of brick. At one side of the house is a huge stained-glass window in the shape of a keyhole. But the house has an effect not at all humorous. It embodies the heavy dignity of those Victorian financiers who ruled the generation between the pioneers and the brisk sales engineers, and created a somber oligarchy by gaining control of banks, mills, land, railroads, mines. Out of the dozen contradictory zeniths, which together make up the true and complete zenith, none is so powerful and enduring, yet none so unfamiliar to the citizens as the small, still dry, polite, cruel zenith of the William Eathornes. And for that tiny hierarchy the other zeniths unwittingly labor and insignificantly die. Most of the castles of the testy Victorian tetrarchs are gone now, or decayed into boarding houses, but the Eathorne mansion remains, virtuous and aloof, reminiscent of London, Black Bay, Rittenhouse Square. Its marble steps are scrubbed daily, the brass plate is reverently polished, and the lace curtains are as prim and as superior as William Washington Eathorne himself. With a certain awe, Babbitt and Chum Frink called on Eathorne for a meeting of the Sunday School Advisory Committee. With uneasy stillness they followed a uniformed maid through the catacombs of reception-rooms to the library. It was as unmistakably the library of a solid old banker as Eathorne's side-whiskers were the side-whiskers of a solid old banker. The books were, most of them, standard sets, with the correct and traditional touch of dim blue, dim gold, and glossy calfskin. The fire was exactly correct and traditional, a small, quiet, steady fire, reflected by polished fire-irons. The oak desk was dark and old and altogether perfect. The chairs were gently supercilious. Eathorne's inquiries as to the health of Mrs. Babbitt, Miss Babbitt, and the other children were softly parental, but Babbitt had nothing with which to answer him. It was indecent to think of using the "How's tricks, old socks?" which gratified Vergil Gunch and Frink and Howard Littlefield, men who till now had seemed successful and urbane. Babbitt and Frink sat politely, and politely did Eathorne observe, opening his thin lips just wide enough to dismiss the words, "Gentlemen, before we begin our conference, you may have felt the cold in coming in here, so good of you to save an old man the journey. Shall we perhaps have a whiskey toddy?" So well trained was Babbitt in all the conversation that befits a good fellow that he almost disgraced himself with, "Rather than make trouble and always providin' there ain't any enforcement officers hiding in the wastebasket." The words died choking in his throat. He bowed in flustered obedience. So did Chum Frink. Eathorne rang for the maid. The modern and luxurious Babbitt had never seen any one ring for a servant in a private house, except during meals. Himself in hotels had rung for bellboys, but in the house you didn't hurt Matilda's feelings. You went out in the hall and shouted for her. Nor had he, since Prohibition, known any one to be casual about drinking. It was extraordinary merely to sip his toddy and not cry, Oh, Mama, this hits me right where I live." And always with the ecstasy of youth meeting greatness, he marveled, "That little fuzzy face there, why, he could make me or break me if he told my banker to call my loan. Gosh, that quarter-sized squirt, and looking like he hadn't got a single bit of hustle in him. I wonder, do we boosters throw too many fits about pep?" From this thought he shuddered away and listened devoutly to Eathorne's idea on the advancement of the Sunday School, which were very clear and very bad. Diffidently Babbitt outlined his own suggestions. "I think if you analyze the needs of the school, in fact, going right at it is as if it were a merchandising problem. The course of the one basic and fundamental need is growth. I presume we're all agreed we won't be satisfied till we build up the biggest darn Sunday school in the whole state, so the Chatham Road Presbyterian won't have to take anything off anybody. Now about jazzing up the campaign for prospects. They've already used contesting teams and given prizes to the kids that bring in the most members, and they made a mistake there. The prizes were a lot of folderols and doodads like poetry books and illustrated testaments, instead of something a real live kid would want to work for, like real cash or a speedometer for his motorcycle. Course, I suppose it's all fine and dandy to illustrate the lessons with those decorated bookmarks and blackboard drawings and so on, but when it comes down to the real he-hustling, getting out and drumming up customers, or members, I mean, why, you got to make it worth a fellow's while. Now I want to propose 2 stunts. First, divide the Sunday School into 4 armies, depending on age. Everybody gets a military rank in his own army according to how many members he brings in, and the duffers that lie down on us and don't bring in any, they remains privates. The pastor and superintendent rank as generals, and everybody has got to give salutes and all the rest of that junk, just like a regular army, to make 'em feel it's worthwhile to get rank. Then, second, course, the school has its advertising committee, but Lord, nobody ever really works good. Nobody works well just for the love of it. The thing to do is be practical and up to date, and hire a real paid press agent for the Sunday School, some newspaper fellow who can give part of his time." "Sure, you bet," said Chum Frink. "Think of the nice juicy bits he could get in," Babbitt crowed. "Not only the big, salient, vital facts about how fast the Sunday School and the collection is growing, but a lot of humorous gossip and kidding. How about some blowhard fell down on his pledge to get new members, or the good time the Sacred Trinity girls had at their Winehurst party? And on the side, if he had time, the press agent might even boost the lessons themselves. Do a little advertising for all the Sunday schools in town. In fact, no use being hoggish towards the rest of 'em, providing we can keep the bulge on 'em in membership. For instance, he might get the papers to course I haven't got a literary training like Frank here, and I'm just guessing how the pieces ought to be written, but take, for instance, suppose the week's lesson is about Jacob. Well, the press agent might get in something that would have a fine moral, and yet with a trick headline that'd get folks to read it. Say, like, 'Jake fools the old man, makes getaway with girl and bankroll.' So I mean, that'd get your interest. Now, of course, Mr. Eathorne, you're conservative, and maybe you feel these stunts would be undignified, but honestly, I believe they'd bring home the bacon." Eathorne folded his hands on his comfortable little belly and purred like an aged pussy. "I say that I have been very much pleased by your analysis of the situation, Mr. Babbitt. As you surmise, it's necessary in my position to be conservative and perhaps endeavor to maintain a certain standard of dignity. Yet I think you'll find me somewhat progressive in our bank, for example. I hope I may say that we have as modern a method of publicity and advertising as any in the city. Yes, I fancy you'll find us oldsters quite cognizant of the shifting spiritual values of the age. Yes, oh yes, and so in fact